Out in the world, crawling in a field at the edge of some bullshit town with a name like Shoshone or Medicine Bow is an ant. You weren't aware of it. Didn't know whether it was a soldier, a drone, or the queen. Didn't care if it was scouting for food to drag back to the nest or building new tunnels for wriggly ant larvae. Until now, that ant simply didn't exist for you. If I hadn't mentioned it, you would have continued on with your life, pinballing from one tedious task to the next, shoving your tongue into the bacterial minefield of your girlfriend's mouth, doodling the variations of your combined names on the cover of your notebook, waiting for electronic bits to zoom through the air and tell you that someone was thinking about you, that for one fleeting moment, you were the most significant person in someone else's insignificant life. But whether you knew about it or not, that ant is still out there doing ant things while you wait for the next text message to prove that out of the 7 billion self-centered people on this planet, you are important. Your entire sense of self-worth is predicated upon your belief that you matter to the universe. But you don't, because we are the ants. That was from the eponymous book, We Are the Ants, by Shaun David Hutchinson. This was my second read of Shaun David Hutchinson. Earlier in January, I read, At the Edge of the Universe, just on a whim, because a friend of Nakia's mom recommended it. And I ended up really, really loving that book and having just a really great, emotionally resonant, very draining, emotionally draining time with it. And so I was like, I better check out the rest of this guy's stuff. And this was kind of how he made his name. This is where I first heard of him, was this book. And he references this book in his own At the Edge of the Universe. So I was like, all right, like I'll read that. But I kind of wanted to hold off on it for a while because based on how dark At the Edge of the Universe was, I was expecting kind of more soul-crushing moments, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of that in this. So the basic plot is that this is narrated from the perspective of a kid named Henry Denton. He's, I believe, 16 going on 17, and reeling from the fact that a year ago his boyfriend, Jesse, inexplicably committed suicide, killed himself, and didn't leave a note or anything. And ever since then, Henry's kind of just been swept up in grief and agony. But concurrent with that is that throughout his life, like since he was a younger kid, Henry's periodically been captured by these slug-like aliens, which he refers to as the Sluggers. And he doesn't know why they abduct him, what they want from him, can't speak to them. And one day they have a little button appear, and they basically intimate to him through a series of signals that basically the world is going to end on this specific date, and you have until that date to decide to press this button. If you press this button, the world will be saved. If you don't press the button, then the apocalypse will come as predicted. And so basically, because of all of this trauma that's been going on in his life, the sort of crux of the book is Henry's struggle to decide whether or not to push the button, to decide whether humanity is worth saving, whether we deserve to keep going on. That's pretty heady shit for a YA novel. And so, as you can probably guess, similarly to At the Edge of the Universe, the main thing that really appealed to me about this book was its maturity in terms of the themes discussed, the depths to which it goes. I mean, I can't think of very many novels for young people. I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't seen very many novels for young people that really like delve this deep into sort of existential despair. You know, a lot of YA books and tween books and stuff, they kind of ring false. It feels like an adult writing what they think a teenager is like, and it just feels very disingenuous. And I didn't get a lot of that from this, which is the main thing that really appealed to me about it. So obviously, you know, kind of the main theme of this book is exploring grief and the human condition, you know, which is again like really heady philosophical shit, you know. But what I really liked about that is that I didn't feel that it was talking down to the reader. Like I feel like if I had read this when I was 16, I would have loved it, you know, because it would have given me comfort in a time where I was going through a lot of the same emotions in this story. So, you know, for example, I mean, it goes into, you know, Jesse's suicide and sort of the inexplicability of suicide, and how, someone can be struggling and we would never know. And obviously, these sort of like mental health struggles are all themes that I very much related to and relate to now. And the fact that they were allowed to become so dark and so nihilistic. I mean, there are times in this book where like Henry has some really, really dark thoughts, some really like chaotic, like end of the world, like fuck everything and let it all burn thoughts, and that really shocked me in a good way, because it just, for a book that's marketed towards younger people, that just feels so ballsy to sort of confront them with these very, because the thing is, like, we have these thoughts, and we kind of deny them and suppress them, but then you have writers like Shaun David Hutchinson and S.E. Hinton and other YA writers, who are exploring who are pushing these boundaries and exploring these really uncomfortable themes, and I think that's an important thing for young readers to be exposed to, and a surprising amount of sex too. That was actually something else that's surprising about this and the previous book, was that it's very sexually frank in parts. I mean, it's not explicit, like it doesn't go into the bits and pieces, but I mean, it's very clear about what goes on between these teenagers. But that was one of the things I liked about both of his books so far, is that, I mean, because I've read so many heterosexual stories where it's just the whole sexual aspect of it is just kind of a given, of characters hooking up just because that's how, it's a guy and a girl, all the kissing, like it's just nice to see that dealt with in a book directed at younger audiences, that's well done and tasteful, but doesn't shy away from it either, you know what I mean? Aside from that, I mean, that was the main appeal to this, along from the fact that the writing style is just beautiful. Not overly flashy, not super poetic like something like Deep Light, but it was very smooth. It flowed very well. I enjoyed all that. While I enjoyed it, I didn't think it was necessarily as good as At the Edge of the Universe, and I don't know if that's just because that was my first exposure to him as a writer, and this just kind of feels more familiar now, because obviously, as I've said, and if you've seen my At the Edge of the Universe review, this covers a lot of similar ground, as that book of, sort of a vague sci-fi concept, with a gay teenager exploring these sort of dark, nihilistic themes, going into some very, like, mature places. So I don't know if that's just because, like, I know what I'm getting into now. Like, if I had read this first, would I have had the same reaction? So I did enjoy it, but I did find, as I said with my previous review, that it kind of suffers from an everything in the kitchen sink approach, where it feels like Shaun David Hutchinson is trying to throw in all of these, like, disparate themes into his story, but because of that, so there's lots of ideas and sort of themes and concepts that don't really get a lot of breathing room. So in this book, Henry's brother Charlie has a girlfriend named Zoe, Zooey, who's a black woman, and similarly to the previous book, there were some sort of like touches on sort of like racial disparity and here and there, but a lot of that just kind of felt like just one single line sort of window dressing type thing, similar to, as I said, to the previous book. And I think just overall in this one, it's more overstuffed. There's a lot of subplots. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's Henry's brother Charlie, who's sort of a layabout and getting married to this young girlfriend of his, interracial couple. There's his mother struggling with her finding employment and springing back after their father left. There's the budding romance that he has with a young student, a new student named Diego. There's all these kind of disparate things going on that are all kind of meant to contribute to the central theme of the story, and of Henry going through this sort of philosophical conundrum of, is humanity worth saving? And in some ways it works in the sense of sort of like almost presenting it like a series of bullet points, like pros and cons of life. Here's some good stuff and here's some bad stuff, and sometimes the bad stuff is mixed with the good stuff. I thought that aspect of it was really well done, but for me there was just so much going on that it just feels like certain things couldn't get developed as much. And also the fact that within a very short period in this kid's life, like, all of this like crazy stuff happen, like world-ending stuff happens to him in like quick succession. I mean, I know I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but just the way that it's presented in the book is so like constant and so like to the point where it becomes a little bit melodramatic. It almost feels like a soap opera, where it's like you think things get really bad and then something worse happens, or they throw some twist at you. It did feel a little bit, to me, a little bit sort of juvenile in that sense. Not as self-assured as something like At the Edge of the Universe, which I thought was much more cohesive, had a much more like cohesive plot and storyline, and the way things moved. But I really did enjoy this. Again, like, it explored a lot of the same themes in his previous stuff that I really enjoyed. I love any sort of YA book that doesn't talk down to its audience, that treats them like actual adults, I applaud stories that are willing to tackle really difficult themes, even if they're not handled, 100%. And and I love to see stories about gay teens who really struggle with things, who aren't perfect. I don't want just the traditional coming out narrative over and over again. I mean, there needs to be room for that kind of sort of malleability of complexity among marginalized characters. But anyway, just all of those things are just what really gravitated me to this book. Honestly, I liked both of these so much that I want to immediately move on to as much of his bibliography as I can. I mean, I've got another of his books that I borrowed from Nakia, When We Disappear, and I've got his book Howl, which just came out, which is about a gay werewolf, so I really need to read that one. So yeah, I do. I think he might, honestly, like, based off of the first two books that I've read, I think he might be at least one of my favorite YA writers at the moment. So yeah, I'm really impressed with SDH, as I've started calling him, because his name's really long to say. But yeah, I really enjoy SDH so far. I've loved these first two books by him. I would recommend checking him out, checking this book out, or At the Edge of the Universe. That one's great too. So yeah, that was my review of We Are the Ants by Shaun David Hutchinson. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.